I have started the recording right now, as I planned to do all along. That's what it says in the recording now. So. Door
So the
open.
first part was recorded?
Yeah. Yeah. I just hadn't recorded since we got back from the break. Thanks for pointing it out so I could put that on the recording. Right. So we're going to need a reference to the object that we want to access and then have animate. So I'm going to make a game object variable. Always declare our variables up top. I'm going to make it public and make a capital G game object reference. I'll just call this object to play. The object will have the animation on it to play. And yeah, I'll put a reference in here as well. Don't need the start method, so I can delete that. And an update, we're just going to check. We're going to trigger this with a key press to start off with. But obviously in-game we could trigger it with a key press in conjunction with a trigger collider to check if we're close enough to the door, or a raycast also check if we're close enough to the door. But in this case, I'll just create some key presses. I'll make one for door open and door closed. Bool, and I'll make sure not to use any of the keys I've used already. Say the door opens with the letter B. Bool B. Input dot get key down. Key code B. B and N. Door open and door close buttons. And then we just want some if statements to check if these keys are being pressed. So if B, no, not base, and if N. And next what we want to do is reference our object to play. And we're going to check if it has the component of an animator on it, which ours should if I go back to Unity. I just select my door pivot because That's what I created my animation on. I animated my door pivot. You see it has a component called animator. And the animator is taking in that controller, the state machine that we're working in, door pivot, which we have open here, that we set up with our triggers. So what we're going to check when we press B or N, so we're going to check if the object has an animator, and then we can access the components inside the state machine. So if B, we want to check object to plate, and then we want to get the component of animator. We're going to use set. You see it giving me some autocompletes. Bool and float are two standards in the state machine, so we can change based on a bool, a true or false state machine going on or off, or a float, an increase in the X or Y. But we didn't set up bool or float, we set up trigger, so we want to access set trigger. With capital S. Set trigger, and there is my autocomplete. You can see it's giving me the hint of how to complete this string as well. So it's saying animator, set trigger, and then open and close parentheses, string name. The string name being the name that we gave our trigger in the state machine. Is open, is closed. So yeah, pay attention to these little autocompletes. They are helping you out and telling you how to complete this script. Set trigger, open and close parentheses, is open. I think that's what we called it. Yeah, is open and is closed are the two names that we gave it. So those are our trigger string names. I'll add a debug line as well, just to make sure everything is working correctly. B key pressed. Just to check that our script is working. If our animation doesn't play, but this message does get printed, we'll know something is right and something is wrong. I'll just copy and paste that line, set trigger is open, and then change to is closed, and say N key pressed. Setting our controls up here and then checking our if statements down here to use the key presses and access the animator of the object. One last thing we need to do in Unity. because we set the public variable of our game object, that's going to be blank in Unity. We need to put our door object in there, because the door is the object that has the animator on it that we want to play. Okay, and then the final step of this, I save my script, jump back into Unity, and on the player I have these scripts that I added. Door opener is looking for the object to play, and I'm going to put my door pivot object in there. And you can drag and drop the whole thing over, or just search for it with the little selector dot. So I'll go selector dot and look for door. I've got base, pivot, and door 2. I want door pivot. And then if you press play, you should be able to open and close that door by pressing B or N. Press play. Oh, mine is looping continuously. Is that happening for anybody else? And we jump into the state machine, we can see it is looping continuously. So we press play, we're in our default state of door closed. That's all good. I press B. We jump in the door open and we are looping. Where is my setting for loop time? It's probably in the properties of the project assets. However, I can transition between the two animations with B and N. You can see in my console, I press B, it records B for me. I press N, it records N. So the transition is fine, it's just the fact that we're looping the whole clip. I think that's probably just a setting I can change in my project assets by looking at animation. Door open, and there we have loop time. I'll leave play mode, disable, disable, come back, door closed, B, door open, and it stays open. So I just need to turn off the loop time so it didn't loop between them. Press N and I can close it. Door open, door closed. Magic. So that setting I need to change. I need to go back into my project, select my actual animation clips, and turn off loop time so it didn't loop if you don't want your animation to loop. Out of play mode. It won't record it in play mode. Select. Then we want to go up here. Turn this off. Okay, the next thing is to fix a little problem with the jump. I mean, two things. One, he falls too slowly, so his jump is pretty strong, and he falls very slowly, so I would probably increase the gravity. And the other thing is that I can jump, and I can jump, and I can jump, and I can keep jumping forever and ever. I can basically fly. So we want to add some kind of check to see you can only jump when you're touching the ground. We'll use an overlap ground check for that, an overlap physics circle. So for that I'm going to jump into the movement or B script. Basically, I want to add another check here. So now it's just checking if the spacebar is being pressed. I want to add another conditional check to check if it's touching the ground as well. So if we press the spacebar and we're touching the ground, then we can jump.
Are you going to set the plane as a ground? Or any, like you're going to create a tag?
Yes.
Okay. Because also, like when, let's say if we want
You're talking about creating a ground layer. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go on. Also.
No, because I have some stairs, right? So remember when I was going up the stairs, it was just floating.
Yeah.
So I have to make the stairs also like
Part of the the same ground mass. Yeah. So I'm going to need some extra variables for this. I could make them outside of update. I'm going to make them right here. A bool, private bool. is character grounded, set to false by default. A layer mask, which we're going to create. Called ground layer. And a float. Ground distance. I'll set it to 1 by default. So 3 variables. Okay, after we have our 3 variables, we're going to add the function to handle the isGrounded. I'm going to call the function handle isGrounded. Make it a private void. Void because it doesn't return a value. Handle is grounded. And what it's going to do is take the value we created here, the bool is character grounded. And use a physics method in Unity called checkSphere. So there's checkbox, checkcapsule, and checkSphere. So we can use this for interaction as well. If we wanted to create a checkbox around the player, say if we had the door interaction, we wanted to use a checkbox. Is there a door within range of us? Is there something we can interact with? We could use a checkbox to check that. It's another way of handling checks, as well as raycasting, which I hope to cover in another class. In this case, it's going to create, just for an instant, for a single frame, a sphere around the player of 1F, 1 Blender unit, and check what's inside it. And with the layer mask we create, it's going to check if the thing inside it is ground. And if it is ground, then we can jump. If it checks and we're in the air, there'll be no ground in that check sphere, we cannot jump. Check sphere. Okay, so this is going to take 3 parameters. So first is the position where to draw the check sphere. We're going to say at our transform position, the player's transform position, to draw it. Next, it needs a value for the size of it to draw, a float value for the size. We're going to use ground distance. We can increase or lower that depending on how close to the ground we want to be able to detect before we start jumping. A bigger value will make it more responsive, easier to jump. And rather than putting a float value in here, we created a variable called ground distance. That's going to be the size of the sphere. So drawing at the player's position, size of the sphere, handled by ground distance. And lastly, it looks for a layer. And we've created a layer mask. We haven't assigned that yet, but it's called ground layer. And this ensures that it's only checking for what's on that ground layer. So any object in this ground layer will trigger is grounded. Ground layer. Phew. Yes.
Why my player, when I press play, it kind of like starts in a kind of levitating position, even though it's ground in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
That's happening to me as well.
Oh.
Did you add the character controller component here?
The one that.
No. We'll take a look.
Okay. Yes.
But we're not done with this jump just yet. So let's complete that, and then I'll help out. So our handle is grounded function is created, but it's not called anywhere. So we need to call that. I'll call that in update. How do we call a function? We just call it by its name. So inside of update here, I'm just going to add the handle is grounded function, so it is running the is character grounded physics stuff. Just type it by name. Handle is grounded, open close parentheses, close that off. Now that function is running, and it's running inside of update. See, it's open and close curly brackets. And our function is running inside it. So that's one thing we need to happen. We need it to run, handle is grounded. Now that that's running, we also need it to check if our character is grounded before applying our jump. So we need to add to our condition in here. We're going to add a second condition to our if statement. Have you done this before already in C#? How do you add a second condition?
Yeah.
Go on, how do we do it? And or? Yeah. How would you write? How would you type and or?
ampersand, slash, how do you call it? How do you call it?
20 points.
How do you call it?
I think tilde, the
Yeah.
bar. Yeah.
Bar,
But yeah, ampersand will be just fine. So we're going to check and. So ampersand on its own, we'll just add it. Ampersand is a check. It's going to say ampersand is character grounded. I'm going to check if that is equal to true. So we don't just say equals, because that assigns. When we're checking, like ampersand, we do it twice. So if the space button is pressed and ampersand is character grounded, equal to true. So two things we changed in update: handle is grounded, and then is character grounded is equal to true. And then the last thing we need to do is set up the layer masks that we created in the script, but we didn't create in Unity. We need to create that layer mask, and then anything that is ground, any level floor or bridges or any mesh objects that count as ground, that are jumpable or walkable on, we need to add them to the layer mask ground. Okay, so save your script and back in Unity, let it compile. And you'll see we've got some new public variables: ground layer nothing, ground distance 1. Ground layer is set to nothing, and you can see the default ones that appear: everything, default, transparent, ignore raycast, water. We're going to create our own layer. Oh, actually first, let me get into my scene. And select an object that is clearly ground. This object here that I've named ground is clearly ground. So I should put that on a layer mask called ground. How did I
do that.
do what? I didn't do anything.
You do it.
So I've just selected an object that's going to be on my ground layer. And then the layer you can see is up here in the top right corner, layer default. And we just want to add a new layer to that stack. So click add layer, and we can just input the name of our layer in here. We're going to put in a ground layer. So layer default. Just roll that down. We can add a layer. I will call it ground. And because I am thinking of using it for door interaction, I'm going to add one for door as well. So add as many layers as you can think of, and then go back and we actually have to apply it, because it still says default on ground. But now my drop down includes two new ones, ground and door. I'm going to apply it to ground to it, and in fact I will select everything that I think should be ground. put them on the ground layer. A whole bunch of objects went on the ground layer. And we're still not done. There's one final thing to do. What is it? What do you think it is?
Press play. No.
No. You can press play. Is it going to work?
No.
I can't jump at all. What did I miss? We created a ground layer. We have? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Doing something for the character.
We missed the ground layer setting on the script. So it's still set to nothing. So we created the ground layer, but we needed to apply it in here. Set our ground layer to ground on the player. And now we should be able to jump on things. What is this I keep standing on? The heck is this thing? You should be able to jump now.
And meditate.
And you should not be able to keep jumping in the air.
Can you go through the... Doesn't matter.
No, no. Let's take a look.
I put the ground layer
Mm-hmm.
into the player,
Yes. So,
but it's not jumping. But I need to see what
so wait. The player is on the default layer,
Yeah.
and the ground layer on the movement orbit script you set that to ground.
Yeah.
And you have set the objects to have the ground layer.
Ground.
Yeah.
Let's see. I change this. So these are my levels, right? I'm just gonna put everything.
Okay.
Like, everything is ground, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess because they're all
On the
mesh.
mesh. Stuff. Yeah.
So now my player is ground layer, ground.
What do you press play? And he was jumping before.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see the script.
So the update space. They're going to put through this. Redundant.
Yeah, but you want to check if it's true though.
And it's character
Sometimes you might find that the gravity is not pulling the character down enough, and in Unity 3D physics, it doesn't actually matter about mass. If I increase the mass of this player, he's not going to fall any faster. Inside the rigid body, if I increase the mass to 100, and I'll have to increase the jump to match it as well, it's not really going to fall any faster. It just means that I have to add more force to get this thing off the ground. So with a mass of 100, a force of 1000 is going to lift you a little bit. But the falling speed is still going to be the same, and you might find it's a little bit floaty. You can move in midair. You might want it to increase a little bit more. So instead, I'm increasing the mass, even though in physics it should. It doesn't. So if you want to change the gravity, you'll literally have to change the gravity value in the project settings. So go to Edit, Project Settings. And in here you can find physics and our gravity setting. So I might double that and say, ooh, what's that times 2? 19.6, so minus 19.6. So double gravity is minus 19.62. You might see it's falling a little bit quicker, a little bit more dynamic. You might like the feel of it a little bit nicer, and you can always increase even more. And what I'm doing is just multiplying this value by 2. So if I want double that, I can literally type multiple by 2, and it will multiple that value. Oops. Multiple 2. Literally typing times 2 on the end, and it will add and construct that value for me. Bless you.
Thank you.
Yo. I actually think times 4 is a pretty decent gravity.